The world is at crossroads as far as the safety and well-being of our ecosystem is concerned. With rampant urbanization, environmental degradation, and grave consequences of climate change, an overall path correction has become imperative to the existence of all living forms on Earth. Should we continue with the abuse of our precious natural resources? Should we use technology and innovation to conserve them? Can we reduce energy usage with a mindful approach and renewable sources? Dr. Prem Jain anticipated many such challenges we are facing today way back in the 70s. Over half a century of dedication and tireless efforts, he thought and spoke a language that was way ahead of its time. His passion and commitment to his Janmabhoomi and to his own mother ran equally deep.
From my earliest childhood, it's been ingrained with me that truth will always win, what we call Satyamev Jayate. She also gave us the love for all living creatures, trees and plants, the message of non-violence. And ever since my childhood, I've always respected that all life forms are equally important.
The last 10 years saw the culmination of his efforts by remarkably shaping the green movement in India, and his countless admirers began to refer to him as father of green buildings in India. The green revolution he started is the foundation of his legacy. In 2018, Prem Jain Memorial Trust was conceived to carry on his mission and founded upon his values, ideals and vision of a greener Bharat. Today, the Trust enjoys guidance of the best minds of the industry, champions of sustainability, corporate change makers and academicians. PJMT is set on its journey to create, establish and maintain sustainability directions through education, recognition and rewards that nurture future generations.
The best gift you can give to the person is educate him or her. Because then, wherever they are, they will be able to earn and flourish in life.
Each year begins with the Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, a week-long celebration of sustainability, and our annual flagship event, Prem Jain Memorial Address. The Trust organizes a spectrum of green initiatives which fill the week of January 26, Dr. Jain's birthday week. The Mahotsav is celebrated across the country with immense enthusiasm by Green Crusaders and our partner institutions through an array of sustainability-driven initiatives and activities. Having deep roots with Indian Green Building Council, the Trust has worked in tandem with IGBC and its chapters. PJMT takes great pride in partnering with esteemed partner societies, corporate leaders and premier universities across India, working closely with the common mission of creating a greener earth through the year. The Trust is a catalyst for sustainable research and development, sharing innovations and creating a global platform for exchange of thoughts and ideas to nurture future green ambassadors. PJMT has organized more than 300 green initiatives during Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav in association with its esteemed partner societies, corporates and institutions across India, and arranged over 300 online sessions by distinguished speakers and industry change makers on sustainable built environment with participation of more than 5,000 students and working professionals. At this edition of Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, we invite you to join this green revolution, to build a brighter tomorrow and change the world we will leave behind for our children. If we can change the way we think about buildings, maybe what we build will change the world.
Good afternoon to all of you. Namaste once again. I must acknowledge the presence of many distinguished people here. Of course, Mr. V. Suresh has joined us. He's on the panel, I think. Jaimini Oberoi, namaskar, to you in Jaipur. And from Mysore, we have Vinod, who is another wonderful champion of Green Dimensions. To you as a speaker, Dr. Nulkar, let me tell you this. These are all people who have represented and have acted on many of these significant green directions and initiatives that India has needed. And over the last, let us say, quarter century, clearly in the last, say, 15 years, I would say, they have brought clear, very measurable footprint when it comes to not just buildings, but also all those things like Dr. Jain was saying and the narrator was saying here, all those things to do with sustainable built environment itself. And as you all know, this is not just about buildings, it's also about how we feed our cities with all those wonderful things that it constantly hungers for. Today, we are going to be having Dr. Gurudas Nulkar talk to us on what we need to be doing to nourish and sustain the richness of flow of water in our rivers. His work, and you will see a quick note, a reasonably detailed note in the chat box soon, has extended for quite some years now, for nearly 20 years, on the two rivers that have fed Pune. But the model that he has worked on is something that can be easily replicated in all our cities. And a very quick note on what that means. If I were to take a city like, say, Chennai, we are talking of something like 200 crore liters a day, of which one half, about 100 crore liters, is alone fed by its rain-fed reservoirs. If I were to take a city like Pune, from where Gurudas Nulkar comes, you will see that approximately, I would say about 150 crore liters per day is its daily demand, which is fed by rivers. But that again, thanks to losses, thanks to many challenges that we have in this country on distribution, about one half of it alone is met by the rivers. The rest of it comes from those dreadful things called bore wells. Now, the story for India up until about 1980 was only to do with surface water. You go to any of the traditional cities, the ancient cities, Jaipur, for instance, Udaipur, Hyderabad, many other cities like that, fed and was only led by the water that was harvested by its reservoirs. However, things changed, unfortunately for us, from about the time of 1980. And for you all, the new generation of people who are born around the late 1990s or early 2000s, there is a legacy that you need to fight. Today, you will hear Gurudas Nulkar tell you of how and what he has done to see that we enrich our catchments for our river ecosystems. And then we would like to have a discussion with you all. I mean, many of you as youngsters here, engineers and architects, will possibly engage with Dr. Alkesh Agrawal as well as Professor Anand Khatri, who are both people who represent many numbers of students from their colleges. We will see how we invite them to at that point of time. Gurudas, now I will invite you to see that you take the floor. And after that, we will invite some of our other leaders also from industry to join you in seeing what we can do to replicate your model in other cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm absolutely honored to be part of this August gathering, and especially this to be invited on for this particular memorial lecture. It was wonderful also to see the work that the trust has been doing over the years. And of course, Indian Green Business Council, the baby which he nurtured, is now blossoming, and hopefully we are getting more and more institutions at least to subscribe to the model, if not private building. But yeah, in cities like Pune and Bangalore and Bombay, we do have some buildings which are coming up in the private sector also. Yeah, but it needs a much more of an effort from the civil society to do that. Okay, so without wasting much time, let me just jump onto my session, and I would need to share my screen. So just give me a moment until I do that. Let me know when you can see.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you so much. A slight disclaimer before I start, and I really need to do a little simplistic presentation because of the heterogeneity in the audience. And I'm sure we have a lot of really, really sound, experienced people here who might quite, I'm sure they will not feel offended, but they would feel that it's a little too, so to say, simplistic. So with that disclaimer, let me start with my short talk. And the way I propose to do this is I'm just going to talk about 4 things. One is the life of the river, and I'm just going to, in a minute, come to the point why we need to know the life of the river. Just 1 or 2 slides about the Indian river system, so that all of us, many of us would probably have not traveled to the Himalayas or to the Western Ghats or the Eastern Ghats, and it would probably be good to know about the rivers in that sense. Then I'll also talk about the ecology of rivers. And I'll spend some time on the ecology of rivers, and finally get onto a river restoration case study, what we are doing in a couple of rivers around Pune and in Maharashtra, and how are we trying to restore that. So that's my general flow, what it's going to be. So first is about the river. And somebody has a hand up.
No, don't worry. I will,
okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay, right. So the traditional way of looking at the river is a provider of many things into the economy: fresh water, transport, irrigation, electricity, sand. Our cities are built on sand, which is excavated from the rivers, fish, recreation, cultural abilities, tourism, all of that. And that's mainly from the economic perspective that we look at rivers. Unfortunately, this perspective has also fixated us onto an economic rejuvenation of rivers. So a lot of these river restoration projects that we are hearing about, the Sabarmati Riverfront Development Project and so on and so forth, are mainly on the side of the economic role of rivers in the economy. However, these are highly complex systems which have extremely critical roles in the ecology of the planet. The rivers are one of the most important elements in the entire hydrologic cycle. In the hydrologic cycle, the precipitation is spread across all the landforms, and it has to be taken back to the oceans, where it's going to be again evaporated and getting into the hydrologic cycle. But this is a role which is relatively less regarded in the economy. In fact, the term natural capital has recently come in vogue, right? And many people use the term as natural capital. But in the truest sense, none of the floodplains of these great rivers have always been undervalued in the economy. Look at the Indo-Gangetic plains, look at Godavari, Krishna, all of the major rivers, and the fertility which they bestow upon the soil, the irrigation which they give to us, all of this, none of these activities have ever been recorded in the economic system. Therefore, when we are talking about an ecological approach of rejuvenation, we really need to have an ecological understanding of the riverine ecosystem. And that's my preamble to why I'm going to be a little simplistic about rivers. So starting with this beautiful diagram, which was sketched by my friends at the Oikos for Ecological Services, it shows the entire stretch of the river, starting with the source region at the top and the mouth, where it joins the sea. So
I'm so sorry about this.
No problem.
Yatin, please make somebody else host if you can't be alert on this, or make me host. I will sort this out. Lower hand, please.
No problem. So if you look at this, you can broadly divide the rivers, the life of the river, into 3 distinct stages: the source region, the plains, and the mouth. And when you look at the source region, what would be the diagnostic characteristics of the source region? The diagnostic characteristics of the source region are typically hilly regions, mountainous plains, mountainous regions, very hilly, rapid flows in all the regions. They are characterized by very narrow channels. If you can see this channel here, it's a small river in the Sahyadri, but it's not very wide. They're really, really narrow. And there is very high erosion. And typically you will see such large boulders. So if you see a photograph with large boulders, then you can be sure that it's from the source region, because there is large-scale movement of the soil which holds the rocks, and then these tumble down into the river and fall. And these are the rocks which are over thousands of years are going to turn into beautiful soil. So the other characteristic of what is the role of the river in the source region? There are a couple of roles. I'm just going to enumerate a few of them. First and foremost is cutting gorges and ravines, which are extremely important in the ecology. Transport of biomass, because most of the hills, if you see, other than those in Ladakh, are the ones which are thickly forested, including the lower parts of the Himalayas, the Western Ghats, Sahyadris, all of those kind of things. So transport of biomass, which falls into the river, is something which the rivers do. And also importantly, dispersal of seeds. This is the reason why from pristine forested high altitude regions, you have dispersal of trees which get down into the floodplains. That's because the rivers are transporting them. Irrigation of forests. Now, this is a service which the rivers have been doing relentlessly for millions and millions of years. Recharge of springs, another very important role, which again is also an economic role. So another defining characteristic of the source region is waterfalls. You will always see waterfalls because there are high changes in altitudes when the river is moving out from its source region onto the floodplains. Waterfalls are actually very important habitats because they are habitats to some really specific species of flora and also insects as well as fauna. So waterfalls are very important in the ecology of a river. Coming on to the plains, if you look at the plains, these are the rivers. This is the photograph of the Yamuna, which is near Dehradun, which we have clicked. And then you have the Taj Mahal, and you have meanders and all of these kind of rivers here. What are the characteristics of the river when it flows into the floodplains? Most importantly, as the description says, they are all plains. So they're very gentle undulations and much wider channels, a lot of braided flow. So if you can see here, there are several braids to this flow of the Yamuna, and that is because there is no hard rock there. There is movement of sand, there is deposition, there is erosion, and thus over thousands of years, these braids can change. The flow of the water is relatively much slower in these regions because obviously it's much wider, and the sediment load gets smaller and smaller because over time these large rocks are going to break up and form smaller and smaller components. So what is the role of the river in the floodplain? First and foremost is deposition of sediments. That is what it's the most important role. And that's also an extremely important role in the economy of the country because that's where the agrarian economy stands up. Fertilizing soil, irrigation of the floodplain, absorbing flood has been a huge service which floodplains have been giving to humanity for ages. Unfortunately, we have built infrastructure in the channels and in the braids, and therefore we are to blame if the floods are a problem. Flooding is a natural characteristic of the river, and it has to take place because that's how the alluvial soil is spread across the floodplains. So absorption of floods is a big service that the river does in these places. And then you will also see discharging of springs. Whatever water has flown inside subsoil in the hilly region is now going to come out at various fractures in the rocks and displacements, and it's going to come out as manifest as springs, which are either recharging the river, which are called as environmental blaze flows, or they come out and give fresh water to human settlements. From here, we come to the end of the river, which is the mouth of the river, and that's where the river is at its most aged form. It's really an old person, and it's very slow. And the defining characteristic here is that you will see deltas or you will see estuaries, deltas like the one you see in the photograph of the Sundarbans. You'll see many estuaries which are present in on the western coast of India, along the Konkan in Maharashtra. The braids change much faster in these places because the soil is really soft. It's just a deposition of mud, and it can change with some resistance. And the finest sediment is what comes here. So therefore, this sediment is also extremely important in the faunal activity of the river. So if you look at the role which the river has in this section, most importantly, it is depositing of the silt, But that is what is leading to creation of mud flats and mangrove forests. The deltas are actually gateways for fauna. All these fishes and crustaceans, mollusks, all of them, they find the deltas as a safe haven, especially the brackish water where the fresh water meets the marine water. These are the places which are ecologically one of the most productive places on the planet. And that therefore, because they have a very high ecological productivity, they also sequester carbon to a very large extent. So they are actually carbon sinks. Unfortunately, their role of carbon sink is again very much undervalued in the economy. And therefore, we really don't care about our deltas and estuaries. We build dams, we build massive dams in the source region, which arrest the entire flow of the organic matter to the floodplains. We build barrages on the floodplains, which arrest the flow of biomass onto the deltas. And we have been, consequently, we have been starving the Sundarbans of its nutrient load. And that's the reason why the ecological productivity is dramatically coming down in these years of the Sundarban forest, which is one of the largest deltas. Going ahead to the Indian river system, yeah, you can see this map, and we have a beautiful drainage pattern. If you look at the drainage pattern, you have two distinct flows. One is draining into the Arabian Sea, and the other is draining into the Bay of Bengal. If you cross-tabulate that with the source region of the rivers, then we get a very nice way of representing the rivers of India. So the source region being Himalaya and draining into Bay of Bengal form one particular set of rivers. On the other hand, source region of the Himalaya and draining into the Arabian Sea gives us a completely different set of rivers, which are essentially going into Pakistan and draining out into the Arabian Sea. All of them, the Ravi, the Bias, Satluj, all of that, what you see, I've written there. The peninsular rivers, on the other hand, are these, Krishna, Godavari, Tungabhadra, all of these, Damodar, all these large rivers, which are originating in one of these, the hill structures on peninsular land, and then draining into the Bay of Bengal. And the peninsular rivers which drain into the Arabian Sea are distinctively smaller in length. They are shorter in length. Other than, of course, the Narmada, which we know is a very long river. To some extent, the Tapi also is a similarly longish river, but most of the rivers which originate in the Sahyadris in the Western Ghats and drain into the Arabian Sea are really, really short. They're just about 100+ kilometers. Some of them are even less than that. So the Savitri, Tansa, Mithi, which flow in Mumbai, all of these are very short rivers. So again, distinction, the northern rivers, they have very large catchments of the Himalayas, these a few large mountains, and that becomes a catchment area. They have nearly perennial flows because of the snow melt. And they are more prone to changing the course because they have this water flowing through them throughout the year. There is heavy siltation because the flows are very rapid on the steep slopes of the Himalaya, and therefore they will have a lot of siltation. Unfortunately, a lot of these silt is arrested by the chain of dams which we have built on the Himalayan rivers. Flash floods, they're again quite prone to flash floods, and most importantly, navigation has been possible of these rivers in ancient history and even till very recently. That's because they have water throughout the year. On the other hand, the peninsular rivers don't originate in the Himalaya. They're more from the Sahyadris or Vindhyachals, Eastern Ghats, all of that. They have a much narrower catchment. These hills are much smaller than the Himalayas, and they have the catchment areas are smaller. But the biodiversity of the catchment areas of the peninsular river is fantastic. We have literally thousands of species in the Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats and the Aravallis and Satpuras, and they add all the organic matter which creates extremely rich, fertile soil for the peninsular part of the country. And of course, they have seasonal flows because they are mainly monsoon-fed rivers. They have some base flows that's basically originating from the springs which come out and discharge in that. So moving on to the ecology of rivers, this would be some part which we need to understand so that we can actually go on to rejuvenating rivers in an ecological manner. So if you look at this beautiful photograph of a river, which is a very short, you can call it a stream, but it's going to get into a larger river. But so it is a part of a river. Stream and river is a distinction made by humans, so it's really irrelevant for nature what we call it. If you look at this photograph, you will see two very distinct things. One is you will see physical elements. So you have the sunlight, the water, and the soil, which is very clearly seen here. And you see the biological elements, which is you see the flora, the fauna, the fungi, the microbes, which you probably don't see. But this doesn't make an ecosystem. What does make an ecosystem is that there is a continuous exchange of matter and energy between the physical elements and the biological elements. We know that the only source of energy on the planet is sunlight, we are a solar powered planet. And therefore the physical element sunlight is continuously giving energy to the planet, to this river. And that is what is doing its miracle with the soil, with the fauna, with the flora, with all of that. So that is the primary exchange of energy which is happening. But there is more towards that. So this is what actually creates an ecosystem. And when you have the physical elements in its natural form and the biological elements in its natural form, then we have a healthy riverine ecosystem. Unfortunately, if you look at a river passing through a city, you have embankments, you have cement, concrete covering the banks, there is no riparian vegetation, there is sunlight falling, but there is no, the ecosystem is completely degraded because the physical elements and the biological elements are not present in the natural form. And therefore, when a river enters a city, its ecosystem functioning almost goes down. I won't say zero, but it goes down dramatically. And that's not a good way of talking of treating a river. So the physical elements, you see in the photograph, you see water, which is of course physical elements, soil, rocks, pools, your waterfalls, riffles, puddles, flows. There is erosion, which you probably can't see. There is deposition, there are crevices which are created. So all of this together create habitats. And these habitats are now going to be used by communities. So you have phytoplanktons, which are microscopic photosynthetic organisms. Then you have zooplanktons, which are microscopic fauna. Then you have herbs and shrubs, you have trees, you have insects, fish, crustaceans, reptiles, all of what you have in the animal world, in the organic world, you will see here. So the ecosystem essentially comprises of habitats and communities which exchange matter and energy. So what do I mean by exchange of matter and energy? We usually in colloquial English know exchange of matter and energy by many different names. And I'm just listing some of these names. Food production, growing food, fodder, fruits, that is exchange of matter and energy. The hydrological cycle, the way the sun's energy heats up the water and converts it into gaseous forms to steam, that is exchange of matter and energy. The carbon cycle is an exchange of matter and energy. Atmospheric gas balance, the reason why we have exactly 21% of oxygen in the atmosphere is because of exchange of matter and energy which is happening. Decomposition, nutrient cycling, groundwater recharge, all of these and much, much more are what we call as ecosystem services, are essentially exchanges of matter and energy. And in any river restoration project, our primary aim must be to restore the way the matter and energy is being exchanged between the physical and biological elements. If that is not the key objective, then we really do not have an ecological restoration of rivers. Most importantly, the river is also an open system. So it is getting so many inputs, so many exchanges of matter and energy from outside the riverine ecosystem. And these are all ecotones which on a landscape, you will see there is a lot of exchange between, within ecosystems also, within ecosystems and between ecosystems, all of that is happening. So if you look at this, pardon my bad drawing skills, but if you look at this sketch, then you will already see a lot of things which are happening in the river. So the primary thing which is happening is all this leaf litter is falling down into the water, and that is creating everything else that is required by the river. So the sun's energy is first taken up by these trees, and it's converted by photosynthesis into biomass. This biomass then falls into the river, and therein starts the exchange of matter and energy. So here we have a lot of biochemical processes, which you can see here. The organic matter added from the bank vegetation that is falling into the river, and it's processed by the aquatic food chain. You have shredders, you have grazers, you have predators, you have the prawns, you have the fish, you have the crustaceans which eat each other. All of that is happening, and the food chain is converting all the organic matter into another matter, and that is then getting converted into another form of energy, so on and so forth. So I don't need to tell you all of that. Then the floating vegetation takes up these nutrients which are present in the water. The rooted vegetation takes up the nutrients which are there in the soil, and the riparian zone flourishes the food web. So this is what happens in the biochemical. But there are also the hydrophysical processes which are happening in the small picture. So you have overland flows. Whenever there is a precipitation, rainfall, snowfall, it's melt and it's getting overland flows and it's coming onto the rivers. There is subsurface infiltration because there's a lot of groundwater. Not all the water is going to be run off. Some is going to percolate, and those are going to flow to the lowlands landscape. A river is nothing but a set of points with the set of lowest points which join in the landscape. So if you look at a landscape, if you see a set of lowest points on that, you can rest assured that it's a river. Even if there is no water, it will have water when it rains. So therefore, the subsurface waters are also going to infiltrate in that. Then you have the hyphoric zones, which is basically this zone, whereas there is going to be an exchange of water between surface water and groundwater. Evaporation, recharge, erosion, deposition, all of these are physical processes which are happening here. So finally, to summarize, what we have here is we have the physical features of the river, the biological components, and the natural processes. So we just looked at the physical processes, we just looked at the biological components and the intersection of all of this, which is the exchange of matter and energy, is going to create the ecological services. So all of that which we described earlier, the nutrient cycling, transport, are possible only when you have physical features and biological components and natural processes as natural as possible. So in any restoration program, this is what we are trying to achieve. Most importantly, the ecological value of the river is also the economic value of the river. Unfortunately, it does not have a market pricing mechanism, and thus it is largely ignored by economists and planners of the world, and therefore it breaks down. So now we come to the part of the river restoration where I talk about a case study. And by now you would have realized that to ecologically restore a river, you need 5 important things, and the 6th one being stakeholders. So first is improvement in water quality. We have degraded, polluted our rivers. We have made them fecal carriers. We have to improve the water quality. Second is we have to restore the physical diversity. It is because of the physical diversity that we get biological diversity, not other way around. The physical diversity creates differences in habitat, differences in food availability, differences in microclimate. And because of that, you have different species which can feed on that. They take that niche, they take that ecological niche. So physical diversity is the first and foremost, restoring physical diversity, then restoring the biological diversity, and then enabling restoration of natural processes of deposition, of erosion, groundwater recharge, all of those that we talked about. Removing interventions. Now you will see every river in the country has got manual human interventions. You have sewage chambers, you have bridges, you have debris which is dumped into that, you have solid waste, so many things in that. So removing interventions is something which is important. And finally, involving stakeholders. So we will look at an ecological restoration program that we are implementing in a very small river. I'm actually working on several rivers, but at the moment I'll talk about one, which is the Ram Nadi Restoration Mission. Ram Nadi is a really short river. It's just 19 kilometers, and therefore it's a great river to study how you can actually restore it to its natural state. It originates in the southeast of Pune and then goes to the northwest. There are 3 bunds or barrages on this small river, creating 3 lakes at Khatri, Wadi, Manas, and Pashan. Those of you who have visited Pune would probably have seen the Pashan Lake. It's a huge lake and it's a wetland. So it attracts a lot of migratory birds. The entire basin of Ram Nadi, there are just about 3 lakh inhabitants, but it goes through 3 gram panchayats and 1 municipal corporation. So therefore, it's a nightmare dealing with 4 administrative bodies for river restoration. Pardon me. So how did we decide that we want to restore this river? Obviously, when you pass a river on a bridge, you can have a foul stench, or maybe you can see dark water coming, and those are indicators. But there are many other indicators of degraded riverine ecosystem. And I'll talk about 3 degraded riverine ecosystem indicators, which you can also look at in your neighborhood. The first is you have quantitative indicators. The second is you have qualitative indicators, and last you have what we call as the bio indicators or ecological indicators. The quantitative indicators, of course, the first one is non-potable water. You know, every river, if you ask your grandparents, they probably have drank water right out of the river. But today, none of us can do that in any rivers in India. So that's a very, very clear quantitative indicator of pollution. There is E. coli contamination, there is sewage, so many other things, chemicals, chromium, heavy metals, all of that. Second is reduced carbon sequestration. So riparian forest cover is absent, ornamental flora is taken over, and then most of the vegetation which needs to be there in place is not there. So the carbon sequestration, the photosynthetic capacity of the river has gone down because of maybe concretization by embankments or buildings or whatever it has done. The third is drying up of wells in the region. Remember, I showed you that hyphoric zone. Hyphoric zone is the flow of water which happens just below the bed of the river. And this hyphoric zone actually recharges rivers which are there in that entire basin. Well, not entire basin, but at least to some extent to the nearby, the places nearby the banks. So if there are dry wells in the region, then you can consider that the groundwater recharge service of the river has degraded significantly. Tanker from other catchments are brought in, the very poor dissolved oxygen levels. Now, dissolved oxygen is not the H2O, but dissolved oxygen is the atmospheric oxygen which actually mixes with the water. And when the water tumbles on its way, then this atmospheric oxygen starts mixing with water, with the water. We need at least a dissolved oxygen level of 8 ppm parts per million for fauna to thrive, for flora to thrive in the ecosystem, in the riverine ecosystem. Unfortunately, in the Ram Nadi, at some places, the dissolved oxygen levels had gone down to 5 ppm, and in some places 0 ppm, which is, there is no dissolved oxygen. It's not fit for survival of any of this kind of species. It cannot sustain life. And changes in biodiversity, you can physically look at it. You can count the number of species of fish, and most of them are non-native fish. Then you have reduced migrant birds, water hyacinth is growing, Pistia, Eupatorium, Lantana. All the invasive species have taken over and changed the biodiversity completely. And you can do a quantitative assessment of all of that. But there are also qualitative indicators. So agricultural productivity has reduced. This probably the farmers in the region are not going to count how much it has reduced, but they'll be able to tell you qualitatively yes or no. Foul smell in the vicinity is a great qualitative indicator. Mosquito breeding grounds, waterborne diseases, crop nutrition is reduced, aesthetically repulsive. All of these are indicators that the riverine ecosystem is degraded. And then there are bioindicators. There are some birds which tell us the presence of a very pristine ecosystem, and there are some birds which tell us the presence of a highly polluted ecosystem. So for example, if you look at this particular bird here, this is a pied kingfisher. Usually in cities, you see a white-throated kingfisher. Now, the white-throated kingfisher can very well adapt to polluted waters. But this pied kingfisher, which you can see here in my laser pointer, is a kingfisher which will only dive into pristine, clear waters. So if you see this pied kingfisher, you can rest assured that that water is quite good. Or the skimmer, this is another bird which comes in very nice riverine ecosystem. The bar-headed goose, it's going to migrate all the way from Ladakh to your rivers if you have good wetlands. But this little fellow looks beautiful. It's called a black-winged stilt, but it's actually an indicator of highly polluted water. That's because the black-winged stilt feeds on the algae, which feed on a high phosphate load. And phosphate load, as you know, is from the detergent use which we do in the cities and then throw off our sewage into the rivers. So there are biological indicators also which tell us that. So going on to the case study, what did we look at? When we started arguing about how we want to restore, we looked at 3 approaches. One is the beautification approach, which a lot of rivers in India today are doing. A lot of money is being spent upon the beautification approach, which also includes a little bit of technology, sewage treatment plants, purification systems, crawlers which take away solid waste from the river, so on and so forth. So technological approach. And finally, we have the ecological approach. The technological and the beautification approaches are rather, I would say, an urban-centric approach, and it requires huge amount of money. But the ecological approach is the only approach where you have participative and behavioral changes in human-river relationship. So we chose the ecological approach. We did need to use some amount of technology, and which is required in every river restoration. But you do need to have sewage treatment plants. You do need to have filters. You do need to use some amount of technology there. But what we were not going to use is beautification. We were not going to simply beautify the river like we want. It was not an anthropocentric beautification, but it was a beautification for nature. So the next thing which we looked at, what are the principles that you wish to follow when you are actually doing an ecological restoration? So first and foremost is to treat the river as a living entity. It is not an inanimate physical form, but it is a living river. It's a living entity, and therefore it has got ecological considerations. Second, we have to work upon the biotic, abiotic, and the climatic aspects. We have to work upon the physical diversity, the biological diversity, and the microclimate habitats. All of that have to be considered. We have to work not just in the channel or on the banks or in the river, but in the entire basin. And that's extremely important. I'll come to that very shortly. If we don't work on the entire basin, what happens? And then, most importantly, try to change the human-river relationship. It's not just about river rejuvenation. It's also about not getting the river back into the earlier stage. And if that needs to be done, we really need to build the human-river relationship. Today in urban life, we don't even acknowledge the presence of rivers. I just cross the bridge on the river without even giving a glance at the river that I'm crossing. So it's a non-entity for many of the urban people. And then finally, in the entire process, mimicking nature. So how do you use what information, what knowledge you have about how the river actually functions and put it into the river restoration process? And of course, environmental justice. It's not just about human beings, but it's also about the smallest of the flies, smallest of the creatures, the odonets, the dragonflies, the fish, each and everything. They need to have a non-polluted water. In cities, you and I have the option of putting a water purification unit. None of the fauna which enter the city have an option of the purification unit. They have to feed on the polluted waters that we have created for them. So where is the environmental justice in the entire operation? So this is what we also try to do. Right, so workflow, what are the 5 steps that we did? First is we divided the rivers into stretches, small, manageable stretches. Second is every stretch gets a team and a team leader. So every stretch will have a team leader and a project plan, which the team leader is going to prepare. In every stretch, we will document the historical, the ecological, the cultural, all of these inventorization we will do. What is the existing state? What is the status quo of the river at the moment? We will also make an inventory of the interventions and the problems in each stretch. So some stretches might have debris dumping, another stretch might have a bridge there, another stretch might have sewage chambers, another stretch might be a nice pristine stretch, so on and so forth. Then we prepare a work plan for each stretch, and then a participation plan. So what are we going to record? We're going to record the biotic, abiotic flow, all of that. I'm not going to get into the details of that. So the ecological restoration program actually is a 10-step program. First is protection. We have to protect ecologically sensitive areas. We have to protect some areas from intervention, from debris dumping, from throwing solid waste, all of that. Second, cleaning, because the river is a dump yard at the moment. So there is a significant amount of time and money which is going to be spent on first cleaning and getting it back to a natural bank. Third is managing the solid waste in the entire basin, because the basin is what contributes towards the solid waste in the channel. So managing the solid waste in the entire basin is something which is very important and which requires urban local bodies, gram panchayats, all of them to participate. Managing sewage. So what happens with solid waste also is what happens with the sewage. It's directly dumped into that. We will have to encourage private residential areas for sewage treatment plants and so on and so forth. Plantations and canopy cover. It's very important to have canopy cover along the banks. You know, a huge amount of rainfall is actually intercepted by a thick canopy. And that, when it is intercepted, the tree allows the evaporation of that water which is intercepted. So it actually provides a resistance to flooding in some cases. I'm not saying in the urban rivers of India, but in really pristine areas, it can actually benefit in help in reducing the flooding thing. So plantation, but a caveat here, we cannot go on and plant trees everywhere throughout the bank. There are some places where probably naturally there is not going to be any vegetation. You know, sand deposited areas, there won't be any vegetation. That needs to be kept as it is. So this is not a blanket thing. We encourage manual work, not bringing earth movers, large trucks, putting them into the channels, digging large pieces of stones away. No, we prefer using manual work, participative thing in the environment. Natural farming, engaging the basin farmers into natural farming is very important. It's extremely difficult and there are other problems to it which we have tried to solve in other ways, but that is the way out, because then your fertilizer leaching, pesticide leaching is not going to come into the rivers. So that will improve it. Mapping, surveys, topo sheets, inventory, all of that has to be continuously done throughout the year. And citizen participation. But the most important founding tenet is that sustainable lifestyle promotion in the entire basin. This is easier said than done. We have to involve many stakeholders to actually get into this. So this is a 10-point program which we actually look at for restoring any rivers. The next step is a division into states. Once we divide, I'll just show you what we have done for the Mula Mutha River, which flows in Mula. What we did, this is just a representation of the stretches which you see here. So the column headings are stretch numbers, and we have given marks, quantitative marks. How is the channel? What is the flow? Is there a habitat diversity? Is there a floral diversity? Is there solid waste dumping? Is there encroachment? Is there human disturbance? So on and so forth. And then we gave the marks to each of them. And when these marks were given, we created 3 types of stretches. You know, class A stretch is close to natural conditions. Negligible interventions, good physical and biological state. Class B stretch is a moderate degradation. Some intervention and modest river use. So physical and biological states need management. Class C is the heavily degraded state, which really needs intensive interventions. And then we actually started working on each of these stretches. So what are we doing in these stretches? Well, there are some structural methods, bank reinforcement, natural channel reconstruction, removing channels, loose boulder check dams to improve groundwater recharge, desilting, fish passageways, restoring meanders, blah, 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 all of these things. Then there are non-structural things which we're doing. So protection and monitoring, freeing the flow. So we use CCTV camera in places where some of the builders are perennially coming and dumping their construction and demolition waste, and that deterred them from that. So plantation, species reintroduction, pollution, all of these things, as some of these you need to use in class A stretch, class B stretch, some need to be used in class C stretch, so on and so forth. I just made a laundry list of all that which can be done. So yeah, I just wanted to show an example of physical diversity restoration, which is done in in Germany. So this is how the river was earlier, and this is how the river became after the restoration program. So physical diversity is a very important component in the river, and that is what needs to be restored first. So in this river restoration work, we need to work at 5 levels: community level, citizen group, colleges; basin level, faraway settlements, gram panchayat, the urban local bodies. We have to work with the waste department, solid waste, sewage, disaster management, very important because rivers can flood, environment, and then also policy interventions. Irrigation department, state, can we have a water use policy for domestic irrigation, ecological water, licensed water use? Can we have, encourage the irrigation department to operate the dams as per the natural photo periods of the river, so on and so forth. At the community level, behavioral change is what we want to get. At the basin level, lifestyle and farming change. At the gram panchayat, administrative change. At local body, technology and governance change. And policy is basically a mindset. So who to involve and what to change are two things which we continuously look at when we are getting into this program. And funding, our sources of funding, community level work is CSR funding, basin level work, some NGOs are using their funds, CSR, Gram Panchayat, we are taking some state schemes and Manarega, urban local bodies, municipal bodies have a lot of funds which they use on such frivolous programs that you can divert to that. Policy interventions, of course. And then I made this reverse stretch restoration plan, which comprises of several pages, 16 pages, and I can share it with somebody who wants it. So it's essentially useful for surveys and documentation. Yeah, so that's about it. I've already spent more time than I was allotted for that. Sorry for some sections where I had to speed up. Yeah, but that's about by and large. And I would appreciate if we have discussions or sharing your experiences rather than just me blurting out another few slides.
Well, wonderful. This is like, what shall I say? Today it was rapid fire, having heard you before, yeah. Breathless. In the process, somewhere you know the fascinating facets of the Brahmaputra and of the Sundarbans itself, of how 90% of honey, is that right, comes from only the Sundarbans area in the country. Or for instance, what you, and I think you should speak about this, about the tiger widows in the Sundarbans.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So those little stories that, add a lot more poignance to this story of India's rivers is something that, let me tell you all, is not something that Dr. Nulkar can tell you all in some 40 minutes or whatever that we cage him into speaking. It's like this. You want to listen to him, you want to learn from him, maybe you should go and spend some 4 months in Pune, it's a lovely city, and see how you can pick not only his mind, but many of his wonderful researcher associates who work.
Yes.
Right. Now,
absolutely.
I must acknowledge the presence of some very distinguished people here, starting with, well, Dr. Rawal is here, who, I must tell you, Gurudas, Rawalji is 1973 PhD, 1967 limnologist. He's here right now. I invited him to also see if he can participate as a panelist.
Wow.
And uncannily, many of the things you talked about on atmospheric oxygen, for instance, dissolved oxygen, that is, you talked about how it should be 8 ppm. He will tell you his story. You talked about how 21% oxygen in atmosphere is, has a lot of other equations that go down. I thought I'll ask our Suresh ji, our Suresh Vasudevan is here, the former chair, and he's many things anyway. It's not any one particular organization. He's put a very simple question, to you, but I think it's not for you, it's for many of the other leaders here. Is there some kind of a setup and some beast out there that can manage all of these things that you're asking for in some synchronized way? That's his question, right? Not that we expect you to answer. You are coming from expertise. We need a lot of other people who know how to drive this for the country. No market mechanism for pricing the ecological value, which is the economic value. And that is, I think, the central thing that I heard today. All of the other things are not happening because we have no way of imputing an economic value. I will also be requesting two wonderful people here who have been there right from the beginning. Anand, Khatri, and Alkesh to speak. So first, I'll start with Ravalji. Namaskar. Would you want to add very quickly some words before I ask our Suresh Vasudevan to speak? Ravalji?
Each frame of Professor Nulkar should be taken as a semester, not a session. You see, some of his slides, I humbly request him to eliminate because they are so magnetizing, so beautiful, and that beauty presents river as a recreational entity. We should stop using rivers for our recreation. Let us understand what is the recreation for the river or rivulet. Even a drop on the soil, it forms a small wetland, micro wetland climate.
Yeah.
And the canopy, he said, from the canopy to root zone, it's a very complex thing.
Sure.
You see, I would take this as a punishment to the speaker to cover so many areas in say 30-40 minutes.
No. Unfair, grossly unfair.
I'm sorry, Professor Nulkar, but I see you stressed covering so many areas, and each frame is a semester in my limited understanding.
Wonderful.
If we want to, we are not taking students to a cinema show or a 2020 cricket match. हाँ कैसा लगा 2 घंटे में? अरे बहुत अच्छा.
Ravalji, you heard him speak about anthropocentric beautification as against beautification for nature. You know what you have done or what people have done to Andaman. Gurudas, he lives on the banks of Tapi in Surat.
Okay.
Ravalji,
Wow.
yes. And like you said, this is one of the 2 longest rivers west flowing. The other thing I missed in your presentation, and all our students and youngsters missed here today, is the ridge line that you have sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you should find that while others share their notes and reactions. Ravalji, if you will permit me, I will now move to Sureshji.
I'll just add one word.
Yeah.
Constant exchange that you mentioned. JBS Helden put a word homeoresis.
Yes.
Not homeostasis. Homeostasis was framed by Child, CM Child. Homeostasis is a constant state. Homeoresis is a constant transfer, constant exchange of energy. So one of your slide was so beautiful. Anyway, fine. This all homeoresis is the word by JBS Helden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Halden was very famous. Oppenheimer-Halden hypothesis. So
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Sureshji, your question you have to answer yourself. The experts are there. Sureshji, it's for you. Sureshji.
Oh, you want me to? What a great pleasure.
Yes.
Very happy. Good evening. What a great pleasure to spend the last 1 hour nearly to hear the great presentation of Dr. Gurudas Nulkar. I entirely agree with Upendra that what he has put across is a real treatise on the subject from the starting point of the river, the mid-plain, and the coastal region. First of all, congratulations. Very deeply appreciate hearing that. But there's a possibility of an inch-long, mile-long, inch-deep approach, what you gave, and an inch-long, mile-deep approach for getting into minute details later. I'm sure on the length of the river it will happen. And it is too good. My own concern is that when we want to make this happen. Rejuvenation, they want to make it happen. Every city wants to make that. They're not successful in that. Maybe a multidisciplinary team is needed. I use the word in a very, not in a negative way. We don't get that animal, namely an organizational setup, which has got all this knowledge capability of not only civil engineering or construction or hydraulics, which are predominantly civil engineering, but other disciplines are needed to deal with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 model.
Suresh, if you don't mind, since you go so often to Delhi and you are talking to people who are influencing policy, but yourself creating policy sometimes, simple question. The new water policy, how much as priority can the central government in the Jal Shakti ministry offer to river catchments and ecosystems and monies that they will allocate for it?
Yes. I think, Dr. Hari, you raised an important point there. There is definitely provision on this particular to make all the rivers to be rejuvenated, bring back life. It's not only clean water, but as you rightly, you got to bring life back. You rejuvenate means get back all that life which is there, a part of it, which is beautifully demonstrated there. There are provisions on this particular one. The best that I am able to see is Namomi Gange. I'm sure Dr. Gurudas must be knowing.
No, Namami Gange now is being corporatized. There is some Adani and some other fellow who is going to do things there. Unfortunately.
No, what I mean, my limited point is not that. My limited point is there's some concerted action which are integrated, coordinated, multidisciplinary. That's a three-word important. Integrated, coordinated, multidisciplinary. Your conventional irrigation department alone can't do the job. They'll be good for, as he rightly said, constructing embankments, construction on wares or whatever, but may not be for dealing with all the sensitive issues, because you have biological action to take place in that, environmentally appropriate action to take place. Being on the part of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change on the environmental impact assessment one area particularly is on the estuarial mangrove. Mangrove are a very, very major area of protection to be done. And that's a area into which very strict aspect is that no mangroves are destroyed on that. You don't do anything that will affect the turtles and other area, etc., etc. And the other one is, I got a very nice thing from a good friend, common friend of all of us, and that is for Indore. And he has started the vetivel plantation along the river bank, which is also a point which Gurudas mentioned about that just now, how you deal with the plantation of trees, etc. And there's a good note today only has come on vetivel plantation for river bank stabilization, as well as to strengthen that particular one. So my question I'm asking, are you able to find out within the engineering department or the people who are dealing with the flora fauna issues to work together? Is there any good successful model anywhere happened with your experience, including the one case that you try to put across, the small little network?
Good question. Is there a case study or some example that we can replicate?
Working together. The
so
engineering,
I just have one comment in this. One is that, restoration, there have been several successful stories in the western part of the world, and the global north, there are some examples.
Here in India.
In India, there are some examples of stream restoration, excellent stream river restoration, which is done, but not river. And one of the things which lacks in the river restoration, exactly like Suresh Vasudevan said, is that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach. So what we try to do is we try to create a river authority in Pune. If we are able to persuade in the national water policy, like Dr. Hari said, if we are able to persuade the government to have a provision to make river authority, then we can get the irrigation department, a geologist, a biologist, all of them on the same plane, and then we can do a systems thinking of the river.
If there is only one single thing you can do first, in the Jal Shakti Ministry's new water policy, which has come after 20 years.
Surely we'll take it up.
Only one point. It has to say that there will be priority and allocation of budgets for riverine ecosystems in the catchments. That's all. I'll send you a note if you like. I'll connect you to.
We will take it up. We will take it up.
Wonderful.
And again, once again,
because meetings like these, it's all very well for it to say very inspiring, he spoke well. But if there is no action after this, we have
We got to change all the river area. Kuam River is excellent in Chennai. There for the last 40 years, 50 years, each government wants to put a lot of paving. So why is the river not changing? Is because of all those 4-5 areas which is brought out by very rightly by Gurudas. Because we are not taking action on those areas. Only on one area. The civil engineers putting all the cement, concrete, tiling, and maybe an STP once in a while on one of the areas. But that's not enough. That's not enough.
Absolutely.
You won't bring back life. You won't bring back life.
I will now invite Niranjan. After that, the other Khatri, Anand Khatri, and then after that, Alkesh Agrawal. First, Niranjan Khatri. Niranjan has been there for you, Gurudas, and others here who don't know him. For 30 years, he has been a champion of many, many purposes on green buildings. Niranjan.
Dr. Gurudas, Dr. Gurudas, first of all, a big compliment to you. It took my breath off after a very long time.
Correct.
And I have been talking about ecosystem services, but my knowledge is very minuscule compared to what you have done. And therefore, my humble request to you is that if you can work along with, there's another Professor Gupta. He has written some 300 free books for children. He's also in Pune. I'm forgetting his first name.
Arvind Gupta.
Arvind Gupta. Yes.
Yeah, I know him.
If
Yeah.
you know him, I will request you to make a simpler version of what you have shared with us so that I can take it down to school children and teachers and colleges.
Oh,
because as you rightly pointed out in your presentation that building capacity is very important. So I work at ground level, unlike Shri Sureshji, who's doing great work on policy front. So please do this. Thank you.
Sure, I will definitely. Thank you so much.
Niranjan is always very crisp and pointed in his response. Anything else, Niranjan? It's a very lovely idea. Thank you. Will you want to say anything more, Niranjan, on this?
More ideas will occur to me, but I think I will take Dr. Gurudas' number from you and have a long chat with you.
Oh yes,
so that I don't eat into others' times.
Fair enough. Professor Anand Khatri.
Thank you so much. It has been a very energized gathering, hearing to Gurudas Nulkar's complete case explanation of how the revival of that river had taken place was actually a well-detailed description. In fact, I was recalling a lot of other examples like the Ramra village example, wherein one single person had actually revived the whole river, and the waterman who had actually tried to revive so many johars. So what we are missing, and what Gurudas Ji had also pointed out, was that people's connection with water is what we are missing. When we see urbanization in Noida, when we see urbanization elsewhere, the complete urban scenario is such that unlike all our historic developments, we are so far moved from the river. We are so far moved from the water bodies. In fact, I had read about another case in Pune, the Osho Ashram stream, which was revived in Pune, and it intrigued me a lot. We had sent a few proposals to the Noida Development Authority. There is a whole channel, water channel running through the city of Noida, which has been converted into a drain for its revival. But initially, it seemed that the government is slow. But I must inform you all that one student from our college had actually been awarded for her thesis on the Noida riverfront. And this has been very recent this year. And the case presentations are happening with NIUA and MOJS in Varanasi right now. One last pointer that I wanted to share with this eminent gathering is that Dr. Wallace J. Nicholas had actually pointed out a capability in human beings, which is called the blue mind. That is a mind which is capable of understanding and thinking with water and living with water. This is a capability which actually is a capability which is more enhanced, or it enhances the human capability, if I could call it. So these were a certain set of pointers that I felt would be very important for this gathering. And I'm just finishing writing a book on the river fringes of India. Because what is happening is that the government's action by default is trying to take away people from the river fronts. So if people are not there, like when I look at the examples of Dr. Rajinder Singh, the waterman, and the examples of the Johar, which were restored, and the Ramra village, Mustaqim Malla examples. When I look at all these examples, then it's the people who had contributed to the revival of these systems, the revival of basins. And as in Dr. Gurudas Nulkar's whole understanding that unless we don't work on the basin, it would not work. So people's awareness and people's participation are two very important things which have to be worked on, and they cannot be separated from the river. That's all that I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know you wanted to, you have lots more to tell us. This is the same challenge that let's say the key speaker also had. Over to you, Alkesh. And then I will invite Vikas Varikar, since he has raised his hand. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hari, sir. Since I'm very new to this so first of all, let me congratulate Mr. Gurudas Nulkar ji for his very excellent presentation. It's very very well documented, and it's a very good presentation. I must appreciate it. And the work that he's doing for river restoration is commendable. I am very much into this presentation and just listening to what he has done. And it's a very big problem in India that rivers are being so much contaminated. And what I have listened to Gurudas ji, and also I have read in literature that there are many things that contribute to this declination of the river flow and the water in the rivers.
Fair.
So one of the major effect is building dams. But again, we cannot go away from building the dams. But
we have to stop building dams. The world has stopped building dams. We have 2 million dams, unfortunately. Yeah. And I mean, you cannot even say this, that we clearly the world has begun to now realize that even the Hoover Dam has to be taken away. If you look at pictures of Lake Met today, and Dr. Raval is here, he will tell you more about it. Anyway, so what do you think, Alkesh, as a teacher, as someone who is influencing many young minds, what is your specific takeaway from Dr. Gurudas Nulkar's presentation today? What do you think, beyond the curriculum and the credits that AICTE and all the blessed organizations offer us, what do you think you should do in your classes to see that such things as what Gurudas has presented today are incorporated in the child psyche?
Yeah, actually, I think that it is the responsibility of every young one to work upon these serious issues.
What can you do in your college?
Actually, sir, I am in Electronics and Communication Engineering department, the head of the department.
All the more important because a lot of this digitization process.
It's going on.
Yeah. Maybe you can have some of your students, at a smaller level, work with with Symbiosis or whatever else that our Dr. Nulkar is driving. I will now invite, since he has raised his hand, Dr. Vikas Varikar. Are you there, Vikas?
Hello.
You have raised your hand. Maybe you should. Yes.
So am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So it is a very nice and wonderful presentation. I want to add a little bit thing with the discussion. Actually, I did my PhD from IIT Bombay. And in 2011, I went to IIT Kanpur for this GRVMP, Ganga River Basin Environmental Management Plan. Before Modi government, Dr. Jairam Ramesh, he was the IIT Bombay alumni. He was the Central Environmental Minister. So he took this initiative, and they have formed this consortia of 7 IITs, and there they are involving the people with the various disciplines. Just like now we are talking about multidisciplinary or the interdisciplinary involvement of the experts. So they are having all kinds of the people with the various domains, and they are rigorously working on the river Ganga.
Right.
But after that, Modi government, they changed the name as the Namami Gange. I don't know what is the present status.
Sure.
But I did my doctoral research on river water quality. I was work on the Kali River Basin in the Western UP. So obviously, our Indian government took that initiative with the multidisciplinary involvement. I guess the same trend we have to maintain in near future, so that will bring a more rigorous river restoration and rejuvenation program. Thank you.
Any quick response from you, Dr. Nulkar? To him specifically, since he is talking about the Kali and his work.
So unfortunately, I've seen many of these kind of committees get into an economic restoration format, and it's very easy to slip into that, and it gives very positive results. So just a word of caution that we really need to have strong ecological background people, systems thinking into the whole thing. That's important.
Fair enough. Vinod Maroli, I know you will have something interesting to offer. Would you want to join in this discussion? He's from Mysore. He's been a champion of many things to do with waste to energy and processes of that kind. Vinod, would you want to speak, please? Okay. Is there a problem of us asking to unmute? No. Okay. That leaves us with Jain from Jaipur, one of those rare days that you have joined us, rare afternoons. Can you speak? Would you want to speak, Jain? Would you want to add something to whatever?
Well, I would just about say it's been a very informative session. It's cleared up some of my doubts.
Anji.
And indeed very interesting. And I've noticed some of the speakers, we ought to be getting them to Rajasthan, which is supposedly very scarce of water. But well, presently we have a very good range.
Right.
Moreover, like you rightly said, someone of the speakers, see, the biggest asset of Rajasthan has been its bawlis and has been its wells. In fact, even in the remote areas of Barmer and Bikaner and Jaisalmer, the topography of the sand dunes is such, and then the local villagers make an catchment within that topography of the ups and downs of sand and collect water for probably the entire season. So let that also be in tandem for those places which do not have water, which don't have river water, so as to say. This is basically what I'm saying. They don't have the river water, access to river waters, and of course we are connecting them to rivers also. Right. Chambal is of course a magnificent river and the least polluted river, as many of us know. And well, I've been there a number of times, and I think it's a great work being done in Chambal River, and a great session to be attending to today. Hi everyone.
Right. Talking of talking of the Aravalis, which is the oldest, geologically speaking, of all the ranges in India, would you think there is something that somebody from CIIE or from IGBC Jaipur or from Rajasthan, since you lead so many things there, would want to sort of take up from what Gurudas is doing in Pune? Do you see any such synergies possible?
Well, we could refer it to CIIE because IGBC may not have such a big platform, but CIIE and definitely CIIE Water Institute, Triveni Water Institute, which was for a number of years in Jaipur, did a very good work. No, and then of course we have to get hold of the right government thinking also in this, because we had a very, very efficient gentleman who was in charge of interlinking of rivers, who's still in Delhi.
Rivers, yes.
Yes, he's a dear friend of ours, a person like him, but now unfortunately, what is the case be? With the present government setup in the state government, he's got no say. Otherwise, I'm just forgetting his name, but he's also participated in one of the yeah. So we could certainly work on that, but through CIIE, I think IGBC may not be able to.
The reason I'm asking you is, you're right about CIIE. You have been a member for at least the last 30 years of CIIE. And for the rest of you here, even among the students, let me tell you that Mr. Jain Oberoi is a person who got the entire secretariat in Jaipur to go water efficient and energy efficient in the last maybe 2.5 years or 3 years. He's done significant amount of work in Jaipur, and he's now looking at other cities also and what he can contribute there. Anyone else who wants to speak?
Hari, if I may interject?
Yes. Yes, I will ask him. I will invite him.
Taking a cue from Mr. Jamini.
Yes.
I think the time has come to kind of mainstream the word called water ethics.
Right.
And it's very important, not only for urban areas, but more so for Rajasthan. And a simple example of water ethics is that, should we be having swimming pools in Rajasthan? That's a question which has been lingering in my mind for a long time. So if we are serious about water, we need to bring about some architectural changes.
Sure. You know what our Gurudas also said somewhere about how it's, he took that last part of behavior, human behavior, and said that a lot of things fall under that set of interventions that we need to bring. Vivek Sabharwal, I know you have been a great supporter, doing wonderful work for us. Would you want to add something or maybe share your thoughts, reflections on whatever you've heard so far? Vivek Sabharwal, please. Vivek ji. Now, how come they're not able to unmute? No, it's not so. They're not able to connect.
No, I think should be able to unmute.
Jenny, you wanted to add something more? You have raised your hand again. Yes, please. No.
May I come in? And I just wanted to say to Dr. Gurudas, when he started, he said, it's going to be a very, I know there are a lot of big stalwarts, but I'm going to keep it very simple.
Right.
So I am a novice when it comes to this space. I'm neither an architect nor an engineer, but I have to tell you, Dr. Gurudas, I was just riveted. I have learned so much. I have taken away so much from your presentation. It was so comprehensive, so complete. I think it had enough technical, and yet it connected all the dots to somebody who is not doesn't have this background, does not come from a technical background, also takes away as much as, all the people we are hearing today. So I especially just wanted to, sorry, I jumped in and said that.
Not
But
at
thank
all.
you very
Very
much.
gracious.
Really enjoyed this very much.
Payal, you're always very gracious. It takes so little to say such things that you have felt as warmly. And thank you for saying what you did just now. To the rest of you, to Gurudas also, Payal is a very distinguished, what shall I say, fashion icon and such things. She's been into couture for many years now, 30 years now. She is, of course, the only child and only, as biologically, whatever, many other things he created in life, Dr. Jain. And one of the few things that he did like this at the biological level is Payal. And very, very wonderful person Payal also is. But the point is, to the rest of you, I must say, today you heard him speak in English and give you a rattle at the speed at which he did today. Knowing that there are many distinguished people, as he started off giving, when he added that rider. The thing is that when you hear him speak in Hindi, for instance, and in a measured way, and he's reasonably dexterous. He can speak Hindi without having to take recourse to some English words in between, which I do sometimes when I have to speak in Hindi. So you must listen to him sometime. Maybe I'll send a recording to any of you who's interested of one of those things that he did for us somewhere or the other. Anand, Khatri, back again to you. You want to add anything? Because you obviously, if you're working on a book like this on river fringes of India, there must be other thoughts. We have another 7-8 minutes. Maybe we'll ask.
Yes, definitely. I must actually recall a few international examples from South Korea, which India has to learn from. In South Korea, they were, after the Korean War, there were the Han River, and one of its very major tributaries, which was running through the city of South Korea, was actually, built over. Like we are day in and day out trying to cover up our small streams. Dr. Nulkar had very clearly defined the most interesting part in his talk was the definition of a stream. The way he was explaining the ecosystem formation and how you differentiate a river from a stream and how important a stream also is. So in South Korea, what happened was that initially the Han River was, cleared up, and what they had done was that they had tried to rework on its ecosystem, because it was the ecosystem that made the river pure. From the level of being a drain, it became a place where they had a boat race. This was way back during the Seoul Olympics. After that, in 2003, this particular stream, the name of the stream is fairly complicated. I may not be able to pronounce it very clearly, but it's a Han River stream. And that stream was uncovered. There was a highway which was running, which was built over the stream. So I am recalling this example because recently I had gone to Jammu to evaluate the Jammu Smart City projects. So that is where they were planning to build a road over a stream, which was a Tavi River stream. So I had tried to stop, I had to try to give them a piece of advice, but understanding how systems work and how a clear line of, site is there wherever there's a stream which is running and a road can run and it can connect to the city is something that is unavoidable. So they uncovered that stream, and right now more than how many thousands of people work, relish that particular stream, the ecosystem of which was revived. And there are so many museums built along the stream. So it becomes a complete case of understanding how much of, concern it would be for the mayor to have done that to the city. So that is what has to be done here.
Yeah. For want of time, I'm doing this. Sorry, I don't like to be rude about this. But you're right, multiple things have to be done, and it's always the want of experts or the want of willingness from all these blessed people who execute it from elected bodies and administrative things. Ishwar Satya, you wanted to add something? Ishwar?
You are there.
Can you speak? We can't hear you. Yes, please. Ishwar? Ishwar, you want to speak? Okay.
Yes, sir. Hello, gentlemen. I
Yes.
should introduce myself.
Yes.
I am urban and regional planner. My interest was in ecology.
Okay.
We have developed new towns in Middle East.
Okay. Fair enough.
Especially I was in Tehran. Now I'm interested because I'm staying now near Shimla in Solan area.
Okay.
So we have some areas which is valleys and water is flowing through.
Yes.
But problem is now coming up because of climate change. There is less and less water. I fear that there may be dried rivers now. How to tackle with them? Sometimes there is too much rain.
Sure.
And sometimes there is a
that was
hole in a town.
essentially, yes, that was essentially the burden of what Dr. Nulkar presented today. If you have any youngsters there, students there in Himachal or wherever you are, you could always have them reach out to us. We will see how we can help you do that. The question is very simplistic. The answer is very complicated, in many ways, and complex. And it's all to do with doing, finally, like our Professor Anand Khatri also said just now. That's it, I think. We have another 3-4 minutes. Anyone else who wants to? Vivek Sabharwal, can I request you once again to maybe unmute and speak and share some thoughts? You know what Sureshji said earlier. And in the context, therefore, of industry or of colleges, maybe you want to say something. No, he's not there.
Somebody has come to his office actually, so there are a couple of visitors. So,
okay. Then never mind. Sureshji, back to you. I ask you, the only reason I ask you is this. A lot of such expertise lies in this country. And sadly, today you saw that even a Dr. Nulkar had to take a German example, or just now we heard, Anand Khatri taking some South Korean example, with a country which is probably 70 times, 20 times larger than both those countries put together, right?
Yeah.
Why are we having this sad state? What do we do about this?
It's a very serious situation. In fact, I think the answer lies in the question that I asked. We do not have. We know the what do you call diagnosis, as beautifully brought out by Dr. Gurudas, which is covering a lot of issues there. And we also might know the prescription over there for what needs to be done, which is set towards the end 1-6-1. But then at the end of it, we do not have the right treatment team available. We don't have a good delivery system to deal with that. First of all, this has not got into the national psyche that if you want the country to be economically and environmentally rich over there, you got to respect your rivers first. And if the rivers are not treated properly, you're not going to end up. So this particular thing, as you rightly said, Hari, it should go into the Jal Shakti Ministry and Ministry of Environment, Forest Ministry and Ministry of Urban Housing and Urban. All the three have to put a clap together.
Got it.
And that's not happening. Put them all into one room, lock the room, and find out a solution with that. And then only you can come out of the room. Something of that nature. Otherwise, predominantly, I'm a civil engineer.
Can you enable that?
I'm a civil engineer. 1.5 minutes. Civil engineer, but predominantly we are more into the construction-related solutions coming, which is what irrigation department is all about. And a few hydrology people, again, talks of only the flow and all that, but not for the rejuvenation aspect. We don't have that. And therefore, this message has got to go in a large way and send it across to the, as you said, as a policy document to the Ministry of Jal Shakti, as well as Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Ministry of Housing and Urban. Especially 100 smart cities, 500 Amrit cities getting in 2.0 version, where all the rivers are flowing, we can play a very major role.
I will write a mail to you. I'll copy Dr. Nulkar also. Let's see how we can take this. Harshal Parikh, you wanted to say something. Harshal is a wastewater management expert from Gujarat, from Ahmedabad. Go on, Harshal, please.
I know.
Yeah, it was a very wonderful presentation shared by Gurudas Nulkar. First, one question I have. In Ahmedabad, we have a Sabarmati Riverfront Development Corporation, and under the leadership of Sabarmati Riverfront Development, the Sabarmati River fronts on both the side, east and west, are developed. So first, can this project is considered as a river restoration, because this is some kind of different kind of project?
Yes,
So-
already answered that question, but maybe Gurudas, you want to say something about those blessed things called concrete embankments with no physical actual elements, there at all. I'm just quoting you on from what you said. Yeah, go on.
So Sabarmati, I visited the Sabarmati River. What the Sabarmati River Development Project is, it's a cement concrete coffin for Sabarmati. It is an absolute coffin for a dead river, nothing other than that. It's a beautification project to the hilt, which is only going to benefit the contractors who are involved in it. It is not about the river ecology.
Sureshji, you're listening. Sureshji, you're listening to him. No, you have to unmute. You have to unmute. Yeah.
Correct, correct. Yes, yes.
Dr.
So,
Gurudas,
Gurudasji, that's fine. That is very correct. It's against the nature and against the nature and against the flow also. Okay. Now, what I have seen in your presentation about the river restoration. So, one thought came in my mind is that definitely river can be restored, stream can be restored, and a lot of projects has been done in India also, and you are doing wonderful work. But what about maintaining that restoration?
The beauty of ecological restoration is you don't require intervention. We are trying to mimic natural processes. So once the river takes over, then we have to step out.
Ashil bhai, I'll do one thing. You, Ravalji, and others, I'll connect you to Gurudas. Please take this conversation. Srinivas Murthy, do you want to add anything? You are here. Okay, if you are not going to, then I think we should close with only one last. Yes.
Can I come in for a?
Yes, Ravalji. Very quickly,
1 kilometer of 4-lane highway takes 30,000 tons of sand. All civil engineers must decide, if they take away this volume of sand, how are they going to pay it back to the rivers?
Absolutely.
Okay. Second part is, lot of river beds are under sludging program. I mean, desludging. Now the bottom biota, like red worms and all that, their lamp brush chromosomes are equipped to shoot up 40 times more DNA manufacturing that will handle the detritus. All such molecular and genomic areas will have to be covered before running a road roller or an excavator. Thank you.
That's it, I think. Anything you want to ask, Dr. Nulkar, this is for you. Anything you want to ask of these leaders from academia and policy shapers like our Sureshji?
So I had something in mind, and if we could actually have a workshop on this, a roundtable or a discussion, which would not have a time limit, and that wherein we are actually pooling our brains and putting into something which we can actually recommend to the national water policy as well as to government. That will be an ideal thing, maybe 2-3 hours workshop.
Lovely. I will come back on this. We'll see that PJMT enables this. We'll get some of these people and maybe a few more who have been working on these things, as well as on lake ecosystems, which, as you all know, need as much attention, and they have the same intricate whatever connections.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I think we have way far exceeded our, it's now 94 minutes since we started. I must thank all of you, especially people from the colleges here, Professor Anand, Khatri, then Alkesh and others. Niranjan is still here. Wonderful to have him, as well as Sureshji. And many of you who are students here. Please go back to the recording, which should be available by Monday on the Prem Jain Memorial website, and listen to Dr. Nulkar again. If you listen to him again, and then you write to him, I can tell you one thing about all these people, they are like children. If you write to them, they are overjoyed, and they will do whatever they can to see that they share time with you and help you. This is a guarantee I'm giving you. I'm not just assuring you. We are all like that. So please write to Dr. Gurudas Nulkar if you need to. We will enable that process from here at Prem Jain. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Payal, for being here after quite some time. You're here today, and it's
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Really nice.
Good session, Hari.
Yeah,
Good
it was.
session.
Bye everyone. Bye.
Thank you,
Oh,
Suresh.
thank you, genuinely. Very, very nice to have you here after a long time. You are a very, you're an action-oriented leader. You're not somebody who talks. But I know that the reason I was happy when you logged in this morning, or you said that you're logging in, is that people like you can take what he said. See, they are the, call them if you like, the knowledge bearers. You are the action bearers. You are the ones who can drive it vis-a-vis government and elsewhere. And you know every minister from school and such things. That's the one advantage he carries in Rajasthan, I must tell you all. And so
Inshallah.
yes, inshallah. You must try and see what
And
he can
he's
do.
been our big supporter from day one. So thank you, Jain.
No, Payal, so kind of all of you. Thank you, Payal. Thank you. I'm always a
Thanks
part
so
of
much.
Gemini can do great things. Gemini can do great things.
Of course he can. He can. To people like Gurudas, I must say that people like Upendra, a wonderful person. He's 1967 model. When it comes to water and limnology, people like, and every time you have seen with him, when he asks to intervene, you can write that down, put it into a textbook. He chisels his words. So we will get Ravalji, we will get you to speak on this forum one of these months very soon.
Honor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for being here.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Khatri. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Thanks.
Suresh, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure, Payal.
Thanks, Niranjan. Thanks.
Thank you.
We should meet, Gurudas ji. We should meet. You are in Pune mostly.
Pune.
Yes, I am in Pune.
We'll come. We'll meet you. So one of these days.
He's
Thank
also
you.
part of the Ecological Society. Anything that is to do with ecology in Pune, he'll be part of it.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank
you so much. Should be allowed Purva's team for the Green City, Smart City program also in a big way. Both the rivers to be taken care of in Pune itself.
We will connect him. We'll do all that. In fact, the first time I heard him, I promised him that we will take you to other places where he can be heard. That is the reason I brought him here also.
That's right.
And he has to be heard. People like him have to be heard.
Yeah. And Hari, thank you for getting the two Khatris, Niranjan and Anand. Both the Khatris are together.
It's all thanks to PJMT.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to have Niranjan. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good session. And good participation.
Yes, very good session, Suresh. And
Yeah.
good participation. I think that I was very pleased.
I think we should take it as a national theme, for river under the PJMT.
I think we must do something more. There is so much to be done. I mean, it's
I
just
think so.
an eye-opener.
Because success of any city depends upon rivers being healthy. If rivers are not good and not healthy, cities will come to a grinding halt. The history has already shown.
And that's
all over
already
the world.
happening. That's already happening in so many cities.
Yeah, civilizations are all collapsed because they didn't care for the water bodies and the rivers. And those who are respected as taking well. Anyway, it's good. Wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh.
Yeah. Bye.